Hi, this is Stories at Work. Today we're breaking down a dramatized story from the world of IT security and compliance about a briefcase left behind in a conference room, an item that should never exist in a normal company, and how one calm ticket in the system can trigger an investigation you can't joke away anymore. This isn't sensationalism for the sake of sensationalism. It's about process, chain of custody, privileged access control, logs, and the consequences that begin the moment someone tries to make a violation go unnoticed. I didn't mean to touch his briefcase. I only meant to move it off the last chair in our little conference room so the cleaning crew wouldn't toss it into lost and found, and some intern wouldn't accidentally walk away with it. That's the kind of place we worked in, a payroll fintech with friendly posters about ethics on the walls and a quiet hunger underneath. My name is Cyrus Weller. I handled access governance. Who could touch what, when, and why? Not glamorous. Just the job that gets blamed when something explodes. The briefcase belonged to Dax Mercer, a systems analyst who liked to act like rules were a personality flaw. He'd rushed out after a late change window, muttering that he was already late for something that mattered. He left the briefcase behind. I picked it up by the handle. Heavy. Too heavy for a laptop and charger. As I tilted it onto the chair, the clasp, worn cheap, popped. Not wide, just enough. Something slid out like it had been waiting for gravity to tell the truth. A small black zip pouch hit the carpet with a soft, ugly thud. Then a second item. A folded sheet of paper, crisp, printed, not a scrap. Then, what made my stomach tighten, a thin plastic badge sleeve, the kind we used for visitor passes, except the card inside wasn't a visitor pass. It was our internal privileged access template. Blank photo window, active chip, the kind that should never exist without a name tied to it. I froze. Not because I was scared of Dax, because I knew what that meant in my world. A blank privilege badge wasn't a prank. It wasn't a mistake. It was a tool. I didn't rummage. I didn't unzip anything. I didn't investigate like a hero in a show. I did what I always did when something smelled wrong. I made the moment boring and documented. I set the briefcase down. I took one step back. I pulled my phone out and opened the corporate ticketing app. Subject line, unattended personal item containing restricted credential material. Potential policy breach. Location, room, 12B. Time, written in words because I've learned timestamps become arguments. 10 minutes past 9 in the evening. I snapped a photo of the open clasp, not the contents, just the fact it had popped on its own. Then I took one of the badge sleeve, angled so the chip and template markings were visible, but no serial number could be read. Then I called the on-call compliance line. It rang twice. A calm voice answered, "Compliance duty, this is Imani Quill." "Imani?" I said, keeping my voice level. "This is Cyrus in Access Governance. I have an unattended briefcase from Dax Mercer." The latch opened when I moved it, and restricted credential material slid out. I have not handled the contents beyond moving the case. I opened a ticket and can secure the item until you arrive. There was a pause, just long enough to tell me she understood the weight. "Do not touch anything else," she said. "Stay in place. I'm coming up with security." You did the right thing. I stared at the briefcase like it could start talking, and in that moment, the part of me that still wanted things to be simple tried to whisper, "Maybe it's harmless." But the badge sleeve sat there like a quiet promise. And I knew, deep down, someone had brought a weapon into a building that pretended it didn't need locks. The next morning, I walked into the office the way I always did, early enough that the lights still felt half asleep, and the lobby smelled like fresh mop water and burnt espresso. I didn't feel heroic, I felt irritated. Because in a company like ours, incidents didn't start with criminals in hoodies. They started with people who thought rules were for other departments. By the time I reached my desk, I already had a message from compliance, Imani Quill. Security picked up the item. Please provide a written statement on the ticket. Keep your description limited to what you observed. That line, limited to what you observed, was the first hint this was bigger than a careless coworker. I wrote the statement the way you write something that might end up in legal. Short sentences, no drama, no assumptions. I described the latch, the fall, the badge sleeve. I included the time in words again, and the fact that I did not open any pouches or handle any cards beyond what fell out. Then I tried to get back to work. That didn't last long. At 10 o'clock, my manager, Blaine Rusk, pinged me. Quick chat, room 7. Room 7 was one of those glass boxes meant to feel transparent while making you feel watched. Blaine was already inside when I arrived, sitting sideways in his chair like we were old friends, not manager and subordinate. His laptop was closed, no notes. That was deliberate. Cyrus, he said, smiling, I heard you had a moment last night. A briefcase was left unattended, I said. Compliance took custody. Blaine's smile held. His eyes didn't. Right. Dax told me he's upset. Then he should talk to compliance, I said. Blaine leaned forward, lowering his voice like he was protecting me from my own behavior. Look, he said, I respect your attention to controls. I do. But you have to understand the optics. We're in a sensitive quarter, board breathing down our necks. Anything that smells like a privileged access incident becomes a fire drill. I watched him carefully. He wasn't asking what happened. He was asking me to shrink it. I opened a ticket, I said. That's procedure. Procedure is flexible, Blaine replied with a soft chuckle. That's why we have managers. There it was, the first real shove. He slid his phone across the table, face up. A text thread, Dax. I left my briefcase. Don't let Cyrus make a thing out of it. Blaine, he won't. I'll handle it. Blaine tapped the screen with one finger, as if he was showing me a harmless joke. He's young, Blaine said. He panics. He collects gadgets. You know how these guys are. I kept my face neutral, but something inside me went cold. Because Dax wasn't young. He was in his 30s, and he didn't collect gadgets at work. And Blaine, who lived for control, was doing something he never did. He was speaking in generalities. That's what people do when they need you to stop looking at specifics. I can't unopen a compliance ticket, I said. Blaine's smile tightened. You can add context. What context? I asked. That you might have misinterpreted what you saw, he said smoothly. That it could be a training card, a demo, a harmless thing. I stared at him for a second, letting the silence stretch just enough to be uncomfortable. I didn't interpret, I said. I observed. Blaine's eyes flickered. Anger, then control again. Cyrus, he said, tone still calm. You're good at your job. That's why I hired you. But you're not the only one with a career on the line when you press buttons. If this turns into an investigation, people get dragged. Projects stall. Promotions freeze. Do you want that on your conscience? The question was framed like empathy. But it was a threat, dressed as leadership. I stood up slowly. My conscience is why I filed the ticket. Blaine didn't move. He just looked up at me like I'd chosen the wrong door. Fine, he said. Then let compliance do their thing. And do me one favor. Don't talk about it. Don't message people. Don't make it gossip. I nodded once. I wasn't planning to. I left room 7 and walked back to my desk, trying to shake off the frustration, but the irritation was turning into something sharper, because I could already see where this was going. They weren't going to attack the evidence. They were going to attack the person who noticed it. At 11:30, my phone buzzed. Dax. Bro, why did you do that? It's just my stuff. Blaine says you're making it look like fraud. I didn't respond. I took a screenshot, attached it to the ticket, and wrote one line under it. Coworker contacted me directly after being informed compliance has custody. Then I looked up and saw Blaine walking past my desk. Slow, casual, watching to see if I'd flinch. And that's when it hit me. The briefcase wasn't the only thing Dax had left behind. He'd left behind his confidence because someone, higher than him, had told him this was safe, and now that it wasn't, they needed a fall guy. But that was just the beginning. By the third day, the office felt like it was holding its breath. Not openly. Nobody stopped talking. Nobody slammed doors. People still laughed in the kitchen, still complained about meetings, still forwarded memes in Slack. But the laughter didn't reach their eyes. And every time I walked past a glass room, I saw reflections of people checking who was inside before they spoke. Compliance had gone quiet on purpose. That's what they do when they're pulling thread and don't want the sweater warned. I kept my head down and did my job. Reviews, access approvals, exception tickets. Normal work. The kind of normal that makes you doubt your own instincts. Until Imani Quill sent a calendar invite with no subject line. 10 minutes. Small room. Just me. When I walked in, she didn't offer a handshake. She didn't offer small talk. She had her laptop open, angled away from me, and a man on video, Owen Hartwell, legal ops, watching with a neutral expression. Imani's voice was calm. "We opened the evidence bag," she said. "We did it with security present. We documented every item." I nodded once. "Okay." She slid a single sheet across the table. It was a printed list. Names, employee identifiers, workflow codes, approval paths. It looked like the kind of report you only ever see after you request it through proper systems. And I felt a slow sinking pressure in my chest. "That list," Imani said, "matches internal payroll approval routing." Owen on the screen leaned forward slightly. "This is not a harmless possession. This is structured targeting." I swallowed. "So, Dax exported it?" Imani's eyes stayed on me. "Dax does not have permissions to export it." That sentence was the pivot, the one that turned my irritation into something heavier. Because if Dax couldn't export it, then someone else had, or someone had given him away too. Imani tapped her keyboard, then rotated the laptop screen toward me. A log view, system of record, not a screenshot from someone's phone, not a forwarded spreadsheet, the kind of record that survives arguments. A service account had queried payroll approval paths multiple times over the last few weeks. The account name was Bland. Ops testing. The sponsor field was not Bland. Sponsor, Blaine Rusk. I stared at it until my eyes started to sting. Not because I was surprised he was connected, because I realized how cleanly he'd tried to steer me away from specifics. Optics, noise, career impact. Those weren't leadership concerns. Those were containment tools. Imani spoke carefully. "We are not accusing anyone in this room, but we need you to do something, Cyrus. Quietly, precisely." I sat back. "Tell me." "We need governance snapshots," she said. 3 weeks. Who granted elevated rights? Who approved exceptions? Any temporary access? Any account created for testing? Owen added. "We need it from the system of record, with metadata intact, not something someone could claim was altered." I nodded. My mouth felt dry. "I can pull it." Imani's gaze didn't soften, but it became more direct. "And Cyrus, do not mention this to Blaine. Do not mention it to Dax. If they suspect, they'll shift. We want them steady." I understood. The moment you spook someone like Blaine, the evidence starts disappearing. Not like magic, like policy, like routine cleanup, like it was just a test account, we decommissioned it. I stood up, and for the first time since the briefcase fell open, I felt something inside me crack cleanly into place. Not rage, clarity. I went back to my desk and did what I always did when I needed truth to survive people. I made a trail. I pulled the reports through the approved console. I logged the request IDs. I saved exports into the legal hold workspace. I wrote a short note for each file. What it was, how it was generated, and why it mattered. I used time and words again, because I'd seen too many people argue about numbers. And then I saw the pattern that made my stomach drop a second time. There were exception approvals clustered around nights when Blaine had stayed late. There were temporary elevations granted to roles that didn't need them, and there was one recurring detail. Every time the ops testing account touched payroll routing, a human account approved something within minutes, like a companion step. That human account belonged to Dax Mercer. Dax wasn't exporting, he was confirming. He was playing the part of legitimacy, and suddenly I could picture it. Blaine building a path, Dax walking it, both of them assuming nobody would look because it was just process. I kept clicking, kept verifying, kept moving carefully because at this point, a wrong move wasn't a mistake. It was a gift to them. At 7 p.m, my phone buzzed again. Blaine. I let it ring once, twice. Then I answered. Cyrus, he said, voice too friendly. Just checking in. How are you holding up? This has been stressful. I stared at the log on my screen. Fine, I said. Good, he replied quickly. Listen, I'm grabbing dinner with leadership. Just want to make sure you're not still pushing that briefcase thing. Compliance will close it once they see it's nothing. There was a tightness in his tone, like he was forcing calm. I understood something in that moment. He wasn't casually checking in. He was checking whether the fence was still standing. And without thinking, I gave him exactly what he wanted to hear. I'm just doing my normal work, I said. A pause. Then Blaine exhaled. Perfect. That's what I wanted to hear. He hung up. My hand stayed on the phone for a second and I realized I was shaking. Not from fear, but from the strange sensation of being watched by someone who thought I was already handled. I opened the ticket. I attached the governance snapshots. And in the comment field, I wrote one sentence for Imani. Service account sponsored by Blaine shows repeated queries. Correlated approvals appear under Dax's user within minutes. Full evidence preserved in hold workspace. I hit submit. Then I sat back, staring at my screen, listening to the hum of the office around me. And then silence, the kind that means something's gone wrong. Because once compliance sees a pattern like that, they don't close tickets, they open cases. The next morning, I didn't even make it to my desk. My badge flashed red at the turnstile. Once, twice. The security guard, new guy, nervous, looked at his screen, then looked at me like I'd changed overnight. It says you don't have access, he muttered. That's how they do it when they want you quiet. Not with confrontation, with inconvenience, with embarrassment, with the subtle message, you don't belong here right now. I forced a small, polite smile. Can you call security operations? It's probably a sync issue. He made the call. He avoided my eyes while he did it. A minute later, Lena Voss, the security supervisor from the first night, appeared in the lobby. She didn't look surprised. Cyrus, she said quietly, come with me. She led me through a side door with a manual override, up a service elevator that smelled like metal and cleaning chemicals, and into a small room with no windows. Inside were 2 people waiting. Saffron Klein from HR, polished, neutral, the kind of calm that feels rehearsed, and Blaine Rusk, standing near the wall with his hands in his pockets, like he was there as a supportive manager, not an executioner. Saffron gestured to a chair. Thanks for coming in, Cyrus. I didn't sit yet. My badge was disabled. Yes, she said, tone soft. We'll explain. Please have a seat. I sat, slowly, eyes moving between them. Blaine gave me a sympathetic look that made my stomach turn. This is just a process thing, he said. Nobody's accusing you of anything? Saffron folded her hands. We've received concerns that you've been escalating internal matters in a way that's disruptive. There's also a claim you accessed or photographed restricted materials. Last week, I kept my voice level. I documented the incident exactly as compliance instructed. I photographed the latch condition and a badge sleeve without capturing serial numbers. Compliance took custody and confirmed receipt. Blaine's eyebrows lifted like he was disappointed I'd come prepared. Saffron nodded slowly, as if she was taking in something complicated, when it wasn't complicated at all. We're placing you on administrative leave while we review your conduct. she said. Your system's access will be temporarily suspended. You'll be paid. This is standard. There it was. Not an investigation into the briefcase. An investigation into me. I felt my pulse in my throat, but my hands stayed steady. I had already expected this. The only thing that still surprised me was how quickly they moved once they realized I wasn't going to fold. I looked at Saffron. I need that in writing. Specifically that my access was disabled while there is an active compliance hold involving my ticket. Blaine's face tightened by 0.5 millimeter. A micro flinch. He caught it, covered it with a sigh. Cyrus, he said gently, don't make this adversarial. I'm not, I replied. I'm making it precise. Saffron's eyes flicked toward Blaine, then back to me. We can provide documentation of your leave status. Good, I said, and please note the time and words. Blaine's smile was gone now. He was watching me like I'd become a problem he couldn't solve with tone. Saffron slid a form across the table. I read it without rushing. I didn't sign anything that contained vague language about admitting misconduct. I signed only the receipt, that I had been informed of leave and access suspension. Then I stood. I'm going to collect my personal items, I said. Saffron hesitated. Security will escort you. Lena stepped forward, not aggressive, just present, which was its own kind of statement. I nodded. Fine. We walked through the office together. People looked up, looked away, pretended not to see. At my desk, I didn't touch anything sensitive, just my mug, my notebook, a framed photo of my dad that I kept face down during meetings because I didn't like questions. As I slipped the photo into my bag, my phone vibrated, a call from Imani Quill. I glanced at Lena. She gave me a slight nod. Permission, I answered. Cyrus, Imani said, voice low, controlled. Are you being escorted out? Yes, I said. HR put me on leave. There was a pause. Then, did they give a reason? Disruptive escalation, and an accusation I photographed restricted materials. Imani exhaled once. Sharp. Okay. Listen carefully. Do not argue with them. Do not contact coworkers. Go home. Keep everything on your side clean. I already did, I said. I know, she replied. Legal has your snapshots. Owen is drafting a preservation order. They moved on you because they're scared. I stopped walking for 0.5 second, feeling the weight of that. They're not scared of me, I said. Imani's voice sharpened. They're scared of what your ticket created. We reached the elevator. Lena waited beside me, silent. Cyrus, Imani added. Your access being disabled during an active hold is helpful. Don't celebrate it, but it's helpful. I hung up and stepped into the elevator. On the way down, Blaine's final move landed. A message from him. Private, friendly, poisonous. Blaine, if you cooperate, we can make this go away. If you fight, it gets ugly. I stared at the screen until my jaw clenched. Then I did the calmest thing I could do. I didn't reply. I forwarded it directly into the compliance ticket. And for the first time, I felt the chaos shift. Because now Blaine wasn't just managing optics. He was pressuring a witness inside a documented case. That night, I stopped being the hero. I became the record. And I didn't know it yet, but that one forward would cost them everything. I didn't go back to the office for 8 days. Not because I was hiding, because legal told me, in writing, to stay out of the building until they finished what they called preservation actions. That phrase sounded polite. It wasn't. It meant they were freezing systems before someone with authorities could quietly clean up. On the 9th day, I got 2 emails within 5 minutes. The first was from HR. Subject: Administrative Leave Update. It was short, bland, and careful. My leave was being reviewed, my pay continued, and I should not contact staff. The second was from Owen Hartwell in Legal Ops. Subject: Return to work. Limited scope. It said my leave was rescinded, My access would be restored in phases, and I was to report directly to compliance for a debrief before I sat at my desk. That was the first time in my life an email felt like a door unlocking. When I walked in, the turnstile let me through, like nothing had happened. Same lobby, same smell of coffee, same posters about integrity. But the people were different. Some avoided my eyes, some stared too long, and a few, quiet, careful people, gave me a look that said, "We saw what they tried to do." Compliance met me in a small room with no glass. Imani was there, Lena from security, Owen in person this time, with a folder that looked heavy even before it opened. Imani got straight to it. "We traced the badge templates," she said. "We traced the encoder. We traced the printed approval list." She slid a page toward me, a timeline. It wasn't dramatic. It was worse than dramatic. It was clean. A service account sponsored by Blaine Rusk queried payroll routing repeatedly. Blank privilege cards were encoded after hours using a device that was not registered to any approved inventory. Door logs showed Dax entering the building on nights he claimed he was out of town. Workflow approvals occurred minutes after those queries, like a choreography. And then, because some people never know when to stop, there was the message Blaine sent me. "If you cooperate, we can make this go away. If you fight, it gets ugly." Owen tapped that line with his pen. "That," he said, "move this from internal controls violation into pressure on an employee during a compliance matter. Leadership hates that. Regulators hate it more." I sat back, letting the truth settle in my chest. "So what were they doing?" I asked. Imani didn't inflate it. She didn't need to. "They were positioning themselves to reroute specific payroll approvals," she said. "Not everything. That would be too loud. Just targeted exceptions, bonuses, vendor reimbursements that looked like payroll adjustments, approvals that could be justified as manual corrections. Quiet money." I nodded slowly. "Quiet theft." "Exactly," Imani said. "Quiet theft survives on people being too tired to file tickets." Owen opened the folder and pulled out a single page labeled Outcome Summary. Dax had signed a separation agreement, immediate resignation, no reference. Blaine didn't resign. He was terminated for cause. Security escorted him out the same way they escorted me. Only he didn't get to carry his narrative with him. His access was cut mid-sentence. His badge died in the lobby. And then came the part that felt like karma, not revenge. Because it wasn't emotional, it was procedural. Legal issued a formal notice to the board. Compliance initiated a controls overhaul. External auditors were notified. The company self-reported the breach of privileged credential, handling under our own policy framework before anyone else could force it out of us. That's what adults do when they realize their own house nearly burned down. A week later, I was called into a meeting with the interim head of risk. His name was Talon Greer, a quiet man with the kind of posture that said he'd spent his life cleaning up other people's messes. "We're creating a new role," he said. "Privileged access governance lead. It reports to compliance, not IT. We want you in it." I didn't smile, not immediately, because my satisfaction wasn't about title. It was about the fact that I walked out of that glass room as the same person who walked in. Only now the system couldn't pretend I didn't exist. I went back to my desk that afternoon and opened the updated policy doc they'd pushed out. 2-person control for blank badges. Encoder inventory locked. Exception approvals separated from operational management. Service accounts required independent sponsorship and automated alerts. In plain terms, the door Blaine built had been bricked over. The next day, I got one message from Dax's personal number. "Dax, I didn't think it would go this far." I stared at it for a long time. Then I deleted it. Because the lesson wasn't for him. The lesson was for me. I used to believe you win by confronting people, by forcing them to admit what they did, face to face, in a room full of witnesses. Now I understood what actually works in places like ours. You win by building a record that speaks when you're not allowed in the room. You win by doing the calm thing when they want you emotional. You win by making truth boring, documented, and impossible to erase. And the best part? After it was over, life didn't become loud, it became quiet. My badge worked. My paycheck hit on time. The approval logs looked clean. People stopped joking about controls. Peace isn't a victory speech. It's the absence of someone else's lies living inside your systems. So when people ask me what fell out of that briefcase that terrified me, it wasn't the encoder, it wasn't the blank cards. It was the certainty, printed, folded, and ready, that someone in my company believed compliance was just theater, and nobody would ever check the props.